Chapter 26, Section 3. We're going to take a number of countries that are going to be players in World War II, and we're going to bring them all up to the point of about the early to mid 30s, kind of giving you an update on what these countries were doing right before the war, leading them into the war. Let's start with Italy. In World War I, Italy had been on the winning side, but they were a little annoyed at the end of World War I by the Treaty of Versailles because they felt they got cheated. They felt they should have got more stuff than what they did. And you're going to have many veterans, Italian veterans, come back home at the end of World War I, and they have no jobs. And they're going to end up joining the Communist Party. The Communist Party was urging the peasants to take control of the land and the workers to take over the factories. You're doing the work. It should belong to you. On the other hand, in Italy, you had the rise of the fascist power. The fascist power had been founded in 1921 by Benito Mussolini. Mussolini had formed the fascist party to destroy the Communist Party and to help himself rise to power in the process. What fascism is, fascism believes a military government should control all aspects of society. The Communist Party and the Fascist Party did not get along. Obviously, one of them was created just to destroy the other, and they're going to fight. We're not talking they just have a war of words. We're talking bloody battles they fight. In October of 1922, Mussolini is going to lead his army to Rome, the capital of Italy. His army was nicknamed the Black Shirts because they wore black shirts. Simple as that. And the fascists are going to occupy the city of Rome, the capital city. Now, you didn't have to just be a fascist to support the fascists. For example, they're also supported by the nationalists. The nationalists wanted a stronger Italy. They saw the fascist party as a way to get a stronger Italy. The fascists were also supported by the business people, because the business people, they didn't like the socialists and communists. They didn't like the idea that the workers take over control of the factory. Mussolini is going to be appointed prime minister by the king, but he's going to be given the power of a dictator. I mean, we're talking he could limit free speech. He had political opponents arrested. He controlled who voted. So even though technically he was prime minister, he was given the power of a dictator. All right, so let's jump into the 30s now. In the 1930s, as we all know, the Depression is taking place. And this was a worldwide depression. Times were hard everywhere. In 1935, Mussolini is going to invade Ethiopia. Reason being, to take people's minds off of what was going on at home, the depression, give them something else to focus on. And there was no worry that Italy was going to lose this. The Ethiopian army was no match for the machine guns and the planes of Italy, a modern military. Now, as this fight starts, the United States' main concern was, don't drag us into it. We want nothing to do with this. This has nothing to do with us at all. Even to the point we banned trading weapons with both sides. So that way nobody could say we're playing favorites with one side over another. But the only side that was really hurt by us not trading weapons with them was Ethiopia. Italy didn't need our weapons. Ethiopia would have. Italy still has and can get weapons and oil. You do have some African Americans here that raised money for relief efforts in Ethiopia. You even had thousands of African Americans volunteer to go help fight. But Ethiopia is going to turn down that offer, pressured by us to do so. Americans go over there and start fighting, Americans start dying, and then people start putting pressure on the U.S. to get involved. So basically, Ethiopia is getting taken over by Italy. Mussolini is being very aggressive. And the lesson that everybody else learned by watching this, other leaders in the world, this aggression went unpunished. And I promise you, there were other leaders in the world paying attention to that lesson. So that brings Italy up to that point. Let's talk now about the Soviet Union. Now, the Soviet Union is going to be a relatively new country. The Soviet Union was formed from Russia and some surrounding territories in 1922. So basically, from this point on, you can't refer to the country of Russia. The country of Russia doesn't exist. It is a republic within the Soviet Union. Calling the Soviet Union Russia would be like calling the United States Texas. So at this point here, you need to start referring to this as the Soviet Union. Here's how it came to be. Vladimir Lenin, we've talked about him before. Vladimir Lenin basically bringing the communism into Russia there, getting them out of the war, and then in 1922 helped form the Soviet Union. By the time you get towards the mid-1920s, Vladimir Lenin's health wasn't real great. He was getting older, his health was not great, and in 1924, Vladimir Lenin dies. As a side note, you can go to Moscow and you can actually see Vladimir Lenin's body as he is entombed in a glass coffin. Obviously, as you can tell there, has makeup to make himself not look so pale. As in the bottom, there's his body being cleaned every once in a while. So as a side note, you can still see Lenin's body. But Lenin's dead, and you're going to end up with a power struggle amongst the other communist leaders. There was no clear successor to Lenin. So the guy who ends up rising to the top was Joseph Stalin. The thing that helped him rise to the top was he went so far as to having all of his opponents killed. So Joseph Stalin becomes the new leader of the Soviet Union. And he is going to turn the Soviet Union into a totalitarian state. A country where the government has complete control. And the government is going to take over everything. They take over private land. They take the land away from the farmers and turn it into these large farms run by the government. And they told farmers that they can stay and work on these farms still, they just don't own it. And any farmer that objected would be sent to a labor camp. Obviously, a lot of farmers were going to object to this. By 1933, 15 million people have been sent to these labor camps. But one of the problems that Stalin either wasn't bright enough to realize or didn't have the forethought or didn't care is if you take all these farmers and you send them away, there's nobody farming. A famine is the result because they were not producing enough food because the farmers would be sent away. The way that Stalin got away with all of this stuff, the way that Stalin forced his will upon the people was through the use of his Red Army. Through the use of his Red Army. That was what his military was called, the Red Army. By the time you're getting into the 30s, though, Stalin's beginning to fear any political opposition. And so he begins to get rid of all opponents. And if he gets rid of you, he's going to need to get rid of your family as well, so they can't object. The number of people that Stalin had killed is not known, but estimates are around 30 million people, which is 3 times the amount of people that Hitler had killed. So that brings the Soviet Union up to the mid-30s or so, getting ready for World War II here. Let's move on now and talk about Germany. The last time we talked about Hitler was in prison. 1923, he had been sent to prison. He had joined a radical political organization plotting to overthrow the government. They got caught. While in prison, he has time on his hands, and he's going to make plans on how he's going to restore Germany to power. And he's going to lay these plans out in a book he wrote, Mein Kampf, My Struggle. Boring book. Nobody read it. It was awful. But in this book, he lays out his plans. And part of his plans, part of his book blamed Germany's loss of power because of the influence of the Jews and the communists and the intellectuals. And that's why Germany had declined. And there were many people that supported Hitler. I mean, this is going to end up being into the 30s here. And people were suffering from the Depression. People wanted something different. They were ready for change. They wanted somebody to blame for the bad times. And Hitler was giving them somebody to blame. In 1932, the Nazi Party is going to win 40% of the vote. In 1933, Hitler becomes Chancellor of Germany. Hitler's going to call his government the Third Reich, or the Third Empire, the Third Reign. If his government is the Third Reich, that implies there must have been 2 other Reichs. The First Reich was the Holy Roman Empire, which was a powerful time in German history. The Second Reich was Germany under the Kaisers, 1871 to the end of World War I. And then the Third Reich would be Hitler's government. Hitler had become chancellor, but he is going to take power like a dictator. Meaning, he made rules like the Jews and any non-Nazis could not hold government jobs. Strikes were outlawed. Military service was mandatory. And all political opposition was going to be crushed by Nazi stormtroopers, also known as the brown shirts.